Welcome back, and I hope you like the little intro there. A little bit of jazz music that seemed fitting for what is going to be my 2020 review video. Firstly, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that watched my video that I put up a few days ago on Boxing Day, and for all the likes and comments and the subscriptions to the channel. Some really good feedback that I've had and that I'll be taking on board as I kind of go through and make new videos for the channel. So thank you for that, and it's all very much appreciated. So today's video is going to be a 2020 review of my year in pictures, and for this video I've picked a picture from every month of the year from my catalogue of images that I've taken through what's been quite a tumultuous 2020 for everybody. So I'd normally do a end of year review as a blog on my website, but seeing as I'm mixing things up a little bit for this year, I thought I would do it as a video and see kind of what else that brings to the format as I talk through why I've picked the particular images and why they're kind of important to me and important images. I've picked a mixture of shots from this year, and for anyone that follows me on social media, especially Twitter, which is kind of my main social media platform, then you'll know that I shoot a sort of wide variety of images. It's not all just landscape and nature, but I enjoy taking portraits as well as sort of family and people sort of based work. So there's a broad mix of images that I'm going to share today. It may come as no surprise that out of the 12 shots I'm going to share today, 9 of them are in black and white. Black and white has always been a key part of my work, so it's no surprise that 75% of the images I'm sharing today are in black and white. And there's also a number of film images in there as well. So for those of you that are new to myself and kind of my work, then film does play a big part, although actually for this year's review there's actually only 4 images that make the final top 12 for me. And film was a key part of my work earlier in the year, but actually as the year's kind of gone on, it's taken a bit of a back seat actually, as I've been shooting more digital, but that's often the way it goes with my work. I go through in waves and kind of favouring film and then kind of moving away from it for a bit and then coming back to it and then being back in the darkroom. So there's a real mix, so it's a bit of everything really, but unsurprisingly all those film shots are in black and white. So I would normally do a review of the year on my blog, and I would do it as a blog post, but as soon as I'm mixing things up this year, I thought I would do it as a video, and I thought it might be quite nice to actually talk you through the images and the reasons why I've picked them. So what I'll do is I will bring up an image from each month in turn and kind of talk through why I've chosen them, what I like about them, what appeals to me about it, maybe even what I was trying to achieve with the image as well, and kind of talk you through any technical details that I think might be relevant too. So what we'll do is we'll now get started, and I'll start with January, and I'll bring that up on the screen now and talk you through the particular image, and we'll just work through the months, and I will see you at the end. So the first image is of our local swimming baths in Bedford, and it's got this really unique architecture, and it's this kind of system of pyramids, which is the main building as well as the outbuildings, and it's also got this still body of water that you can see sort of surrounds parts of the building, and it's great for reflections, especially at night. On this particular night, there was just a really nice thick fog, which is just absolutely perfect. Created loads of atmosphere, and it was just a really nice night out. This was shot on the Hasselblad and on film, Delta 3200, which I really like for the grain. It's just a really nice film. And this is just one of a series of images that I made that night. And I've actually published the whole set on my website, which I'll include a link to. This is the kind of sort of urban and architectural type shot that I really like. I don't do it often, but this is the kind of work that I sort of enjoy doing when it comes to shooting outside and sort of in an urban environment. So February was a bit of a strange month. It was kind of just, you know, that kind of period of time in any year really where nothing kind of really happens. I was preparing for a trip in March to Scotland, so it was really just about sort of buying my time until then. So I focused on some work in some local land, in particular this area that I've been photographing quite a lot. It's a kind of a nowhere place really. It's just this patch of land that exists between two places that people pass through, but it doesn't really serve any purpose, and it's part of a sort of an ongoing project of work that I'm making there. And this image was shot with a slightly long exposure. It was on a windy morning to kind of catch that intentional movement in the tall trees. And it was shot on the Hasselblad using Delta 3200 film. Now, if February was a strange month, then March was even stranger. We'd been on a trip to Scotland, up to Ardnamurchan on a course with some other photographers. And whilst we were up there, the kind of news around COVID really broke and kind of what the impact was going to be on the UK. And what we came home to was actually UK going into lockdown. So it was definitely a challenging time and an interesting time. And I could have included any number of images here that I took in Scotland, but I decided to go with the self-portrait that I made at the time because it was more reflective around that period, actually, as I look back. And this particular image was supposed to be kind of interpreting how I feel, how I felt at the time. There was the pressure of work and everything that was going on in the workplace, as well as just being in lockdown, and we were also expecting our third child as well. So there was a lot going on. The actual image itself was sort of inspired by Dan Winters, who's a large format American portrait photographer, mostly famous for sort of photographing celebrities. But it's a style that I quite liked. I kind of wanted to go for that sort of colour palette, that tonal quality that he has. And I was really pleased with this self-portrait. Now, April wouldn't have been complete without a picture of our third child, our little son. He was born on Easter Sunday. And here he is, just a couple of days old, having fun with his elder sister and just lying on the bed. It looks like he's smiling, but it's probably just wind because it was only 2 days. But the reason I've included this is, family work and kind of capturing the day-to-day is a really important part of what I do. Although I spend a lot of my time out in the landscape, obviously doing sort of nature and landscape work, documenting family life, whether I share a lot of it or not, is really important. It's a key part of what I do as a photographer. And kind of looking back and sort of rediscovering pictures of people like my dad that I never knew we had have kind of really been important to me, and kind of hammered home the point about how important it is to kind of keep documenting those day-to-day activities, the family things, and it's a really key part of what I do. As a new father for the third time, there wasn't a huge amount of photography happening in May, I'll be honest, but I did get out a few times, and this is one of the images that I made just on an afternoon and was shot at a local field with some crops. And it was also one of the first shots I took with what was new to me at the time, was a Pentax 6.7, and I absolutely just fell in love with that camera and that system. The negatives were lovely, really nice big 6x segment negatives, and when shot with the Delta 400, which is kind of quite a modern sharp black and white film, I found it produced some absolutely stunning results. And this was another one that I've actually printed in the darkroom and has come out really well. So there wasn't much happening in May, but a few shots I did get I was really happy with, and it was a good chance to learn how to kind of get around that new Pentax 6.7 system. So this image from June may actually be one of my favourite images of the year. I love a square format, and it's black and white, and also just I was really pleased with the minimalist kind of image that I came away with this, and kind of interplay between the foreground and the background. It's subtle, but it's there, and there's just something that really appeals to me about it. Now, it was shot at the local lake to me in fog, which allowed to just kind of keep that background nice and clear, and was shot on the Pentax 6.7 in black and white film. I think this was Delta 400, and it's part of an ongoing project of this style of shot. It's very minimal, black and white, high contrast images that I'm producing from the lake, and hopefully we'll do something with sort of further down the road. And this is one of the key images, I think, from that portfolio so far, so I'm really pleased with it. Also prints really around the dark room as well, so I've done a couple of test prints of this, and that's always nice when you kind of get a good print, you get a nice negative, and you can actually get a really nice print from the dark room out of it too. So the summer months can be particularly difficult for a landscape photographer. It's ridiculously early starts, and then there is no real sort of golden hour. It's all over far too quickly, and once the sun comes up, everything gets a little bit too harsh, the light's a little bit too much. So always use that time to try different things. And this image here is an icy image, so intentional camera movement of some crops, some wheat or barley. I always get it wrong whichever way around it is. And was about a 3-second exposure, just making movements, sort of upward movements, try and create this kind of wave, sort of feel that kind of flows through the image. And when sort of doing ICM, you can come away with tons and tons of images on your card, and it's really then just about kind of picking one or two that kind of have the right movement that kind of appeals to you, really. And there is no kind of right or wrong. It's going to be very personal approach to what image works for you, really. And this is just one of a small series from a particular morning out. And I'm really pleased with how this came out. And again, doing sort of ICM, slightly abstract work, is always quite fun to do, especially in the summer when it's just really difficult to work in the traditional kind of landscape approach. So this image from August was taken on a holiday that we took with our friends, and it was just a lovely week away. And now looking back at it, it was between kind of COVID lockdowns. It was after a hard period of having to homeschool the kids, as well as changes with work, etc. And now just looking back at these images just brings back some really fond memories of kind of sat around the big breakfast table that we had in the dining room, sharing jokes, having a cup of tea. And it was just, it kind of really appeals to me on that personal level, and is one of my favourite images that kind of sums up that happy period before we had to come back to the reality of life, kids going back to school, and which would eventually then lead into where we are now, which is tier 4 and more COVID restrictions. So having those memories of that summer period where we could hang out with friends and family now seem to be even more important than they were at the time when I was actually taking the images. So September's image is probably kind of the antithesis of everything that I've talked about in my landscape and my nature work, but really exemplifies what I mean when I'm saying that I just like to shoot whatever I see. And then it's not always about the landscape or nature. And in this case, it's just the way the light from the window is kind of bouncing onto our banister in our hallway. And it's as simple as that. It reminds me of work by sort of like Joel Meredith and the work he did in Cape Cod, where it's more just about light studies in interior spaces. And it just really appeals to me. And it's such a simple image, but one that I really like, which is why I've just decided to include it in September, and to just show that an image doesn't always have to be something epic, and as long as you're taking images for yourself, it doesn't really matter what it is, and for me, that's why it became my September image. So October's image is definitely something that kind of came out of nowhere and is not a traditional shot when it comes to sort of my portfolio, yet it's an image that I really like. It was shot of the flamingos at Whipsnade Zoo, shot in the flamingo pool there, and they were just hanging around by this weeping willow in the sort of background behind them, which framed them quite nicely. And there was just this small group that I could kind of condense without having anyone sort of encroaching on the edges. And it's no surprise that I did have to Photoshop out quite a lot of flamingo poop from the water, but I just really wanted that nice and clear reflection. Now obviously I've gone for quite a high contrast image here. I wanted to look quite graphical with the pink of the flamingos really kind of contrasting against the dark shadows and the green of the tree in the background. And it's just an image I really like. So it doesn't always have to be about landscape work or family work. Sometimes it's just creating an image that really appeals to me. Whether it fits with any of my other work or not, I don't really mind. It's not really important to me all the time. It's just about creating an image that I'm really pleased with, and this is just one of those. So the November image is from Stockgrove Country Park again, surprisingly. And I could have picked any number of images from this morning, and actually it's one of the images that I could have included in my first video. And it was shot on that same day, and there's just something I really like about this composition. So obviously we got the fallen tree coming in from the left and kind of curving up into the picture, and those tall pine trees that kind of anchor down the right hand side just kind of draw you in. But then you can see quite into the distance around the left as well, so it's kind of, for me, it's a composition that kind of moves quite nicely and is quite fluid. And you've also kind of got the contrast of some of the tones with the warm reds at the bottom. You've got the yellows that kind of bring you up through the middle, and then those cooler greens of the pine tree, a little bit of sky near the top. And it just kind of works for me as a really nice composition. And, it's one of those scenes that it's not an epic scene, but these are the kind of intimate scenes that I really like to photograph and really common in my landscape work. And finally, this brings us to the image from December, which again is shot at my local kind of stomping ground, which is Stockgrove Country Park in Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire. And this is actually a gate that I've photographed many times. But it's just something about the situation where it is with the larch trees that surround it. We don't have many of those sort of locally. And on this particular morning, the fog was just really nice and that soft diffused light. And actually one of the last sort of shots I took of the day, actually, it was kind of almost a last minute thought to walk from the car. I put my bag in there, just grabbed my camera with the one lens and just went for a quick walk down this road to the gate and fired off a few shots that I thought would work. and I was just really pleased with it. It just sums up the atmosphere of that place, and kind of when you spend so long in one sort of area and you know a place really well, sometimes it's these small scenes that just kind of draw you in every time, and they kind of start to mean something to you personally. And this is just one of those occasions where this particular scene worked really well with that fog and the larch trees and just that really soft light. So, I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of a look back at the last 12 months. It's always really interesting kind of look back and see kind of what images you've taken, and then also which ones resonate still with you at the end of the year, and some of them may have even changed their meaning. So a couple of the images at the time I really enjoyed, but now they've kind of taken on the new context given everything that's happened in this year. So it's always nice to kind of reflect back and have a look, keep going back through the work and seeing if anything changes and kind of if the images change for you. So not sure what the next video will be. We're currently in tier 4 in the UK, so which means travel is very limited. We're not really supposed to be going out. I am still shooting locally if I get the opportunity, but travel is out of the question at the moment, so managing to shoot local where I can. Thankfully where I live, it's quite a rural part of Bedfordshire, so there are lots of local opportunities, and fingers crossed that we'll actually get some snow. It has been forecast, but so far it seems to have missed us. And watching everyone else's social media feeds, it's been a bit torturous over the last couple of days, as everywhere else apart from here seems to have snow. So hopefully I'll have something to report on within the next few weeks, and we'll have had some snow and I'll be able to share some lovely winter images with you. But until then, stay safe and take care.